Listen closely to that sound. That is not just metal shifting inside a receiver. That is the unmistakable, bone-chilling snap of heavy-duty American ordnance steel locking into battery with absolute mechanical finality. We live in a modern world that is completely saturated with polymer frame handguns, high-capacity semi-automatics, and an absolute unending sea of cookie-cutter AR-15 rifles. In an industry dominated by lightweight plastics and modular gas-operated platforms, you have to stand out on the firing line and ask yourself a serious, unvarnished question. Why does a wooden-stocked lever-action rifle designed in the late 19th century remain the absolute ultimate weapon sought after by hardcore survivalists, remote homesteaders, and seasoned backcountry woodsmen? The answer is dead simple, and it comes down to basic survival logistics. When the world goes completely sideways, when the fragile civilian power grid collapses, and the global supply chain burns to the ground, you do not trust your life to cheap plastic composites, delicate springs, or complex gas tubes that require dental picks to clean. You certainly do not entrust your family's safety to delicate electronic optics that require a lithium battery to project a dot. No, when the chips are down, you trust a solid block of forged carbon steel, a flawless manual loop mechanism that responds to raw muscle power, and a round devastating enough to drop any apex predator in North America with a single squeeze of the trigger. We are standing on the firing line today with a live platform, ready to tear down the modern myths, cut through the marketing fluff, and rebuild the raw tactical reality of a true American workhorse from the ground up. This is not a museum piece. This is a hard-use defensive asset that has earned its keep in the blood, mud, and dust of the American frontier, and it is time to look at exactly why it still holds the throne today. The Ballistic Breakdown 308 verse 4570. Let us lay out the cold, hard ballistic data sitting right here on my bench, because this is where the rubber meets the road for anyone carrying a lever-action platform into harm's way. On one side of the ledger, we have the legendary 30-30 Winchester, traditionally known to old-timers in the logging camps and backcountry foothills by its native .308 caliber diameter footprint. On the opposite side sits the absolute unadulterated sledgehammer of the deep brush country, the massive, historic 4570 government. These two rounds have spent over a century competing for the soul of the American woodsman, and they achieve their goals through completely opposite laws of physics. When you drop the hammer on a 30-30 Marlin, the very first thing that registers in your nervous system is a highly manageable, entirely predictable recoil impulse. It is quick, it is snappy, but it does not violently displace your shoulder pocket or force you to break your defensive, squared-up stance. This minimal muzzle rise and soft pushback is exactly what you want when you are stalking deep inside heavy timber, swampy river bottoms, or dense cedar brush. It allows you to track your target directly through the rearward movement of the chassis, cycle that heavy steel lever under maximum mechanical friction in a split second, and punch a flawless follow-up shot downrange without ever losing your primary sight picture. Out to 200 yards, the 30-30 flies flat enough and strikes with enough hydrostatic shock to completely clean the slate, making it the undisputed king of the eastern whitetail woods by pure harvest volume for over a century. But when you open that side gate and chamber, a massive 4570 government round, the entire physical atmosphere on the range shifts. This is no longer a standard, friendly push against your upper body. This is a violent, authoritative thud reminiscent of a 30-pound sledgehammer slamming into your upper torso. The kinetic energy moving backward through the stock is heavy, slow, and completely unforgiving to anyone with a loose stance or poor shooting mechanics. It demands that you anchor that curved butt plate deeply into your shoulder pocket, compress your chest muscles, and maintain an ironclad, white-knuckle grip on the forward handguard. If you get lazy with your posture or let your focus drift for a split second, that heavy optic casing is going to jump back and bite your brow line instantly, leaving you bleeding on the gravel. But what you get in direct exchange for that punishing recoil is absolute terminal stopping power that completely defies modern velocity trends. A heavy hard-cast 4570 projectile will effortlessly shatter the thick, dense shoulder bone of a charging grizzly bear, punch clean through the thickest muscle tissue of an enraged bull moose at 100 yards, or drop an elk in its tracks without relying on bullet expansion. It travels slow, it loops through the air like a mortar round, and it drops like an absolute brick past 150 yards. But when that multigrain freight train impacts living tissue, the conversation is over. Mechanical breakthrough, the round bolt versus the square bolt. If you want to understand why some rifles blow apart under extreme operating pressure while others just keep chewing through high-velocity ammo for decades without a single complaint, you have to look directly at the engineering geometry of the bolt assembly. The early lever-action platforms manufactured throughout the 19th century relied on what the industry calls a square bolt design. Visually, when the action is open, it looks like a solid, reassuring block of industrial steel. But from a strict metallurgical perspective and under the lens of modern engineering, that flat-sided square shape carries a fatal structural flaw: sharp right-angle corners. When a high-power cartridge ignites inside the chamber, thousands of pounds of explosive gas pressure slam violently backward against that bolt face. In a square bolt system, those sharp interior corners act as devastating stress risers. These are concentrated structural failure points where microscopic fractures love to form over time under continuous kinetic shock. If you feed those older actions a steady diet of heavy hunting loads, the steel doesn't just wear down gradually. It accumulates hidden structural fatigue until it reaches a catastrophic breaking point. Marlin engineers looked at that systemic vulnerability and developed a brilliant, lasting manufacturing solution: the round bolt assembly. By replacing those flat-sided blocks with a perfectly cylindrical, precision-machined round bolt, they completely transformed the physics of receiver lockup. When you pull that lever up and close the action, the circular bolt moves smoothly into perfectly contoured locking lugs, distributing that massive rearward explosive force evenly across a continuous, curved surface area. There are no sharp corners to trap the kinetic energy, and no weak seams to exploit. This clean mechanical layout is the exact reason why the platform handles modern, high-pressure, smokeless cartridges with absolute ironclad safety. It virtually eliminates the risk of catastrophic metal fatigue or receiver stretching, ensuring that the critical headspace parameters remain factory perfect even after you run tens of thousands of full-power rounds down the bore. It is the difference between an action that merely holds together and an action that is engineered to outlast the person holding the grip. The side ejection moat smashing the Winchester monopoly? Let us talk about tactical positioning on the commercial battlefield, because back in 1883, Winchester completely dominated the American long gun market with an iron fist. They held a massive 17-year legal lockout on enclosed tubular magazine designs, forcing every other rifle builder in the country to watch helplessly from the sidelines. It was a total monopoly, but the exact moment that restrictive patent expired, Marlin did not just build a cheap copy to compete, they engineered a devastating, permanent answer. Marlin carefully studied the market and identified a massive systemic engineering limitation built directly into the very bones of every single Winchester rifle then in production: the top ejection design flaw. When you cycled the lever on a Winchester, the internal mechanical linkage flung the blistering hot, spent brass casing straight up out of the open top of the receiver, right across your primary line of sight. In the 19th century, when everyone shot with open iron sights, that was just a minor, everyday annoyance. But as precision long-range glass and telescopic optics became commercially available, top ejection instantly became an absolute catastrophic deal breaker. You literally could not mount a scope directly over the center line of the bore because the flying hot brass would smash repeatedly into the glass optic casing, or worse, jam back down into the open action, causing a critical weapon malfunction. Marlin completely bypassed this structural constraint by relocating the ejection port to the right sidewall of the receiver chassis. This side ejection breakthrough left the solid steel top of the receiver completely blank, flat, thick, and rigid. For a professional frontier hunter or a marksman trying to squeeze every single ounce of mechanical accuracy out of their barrel steel, this shifted the entire paradigm of long-range shooting. It meant you could bolt a high-magnification optical sight perfectly flush over the center of the bore, keeping your primary sight line crystal clear through every single shot without hot brass interrupting your vision or damaging your equipment. That single, brilliant engineering decision became a massive competitive moat that Winchester could not bridge for decades, establishing Marlin as the premier choice for accuracy-focused shooters across the continent. The maintenance trap tubular magazine vulnerabilities in the wild. When you are thousands of miles away from the comfort of a clean workbench, tracking game out in the unforgiving freezing backcountry, your firearm is only as reliable as its absolute dirtiest component. Everyone in the mainstream gun community loves to praise the lever-action rifle for being a fully enclosed, robust mechanical system, but they completely ignore a massive, glaring vulnerability running right beneath that cold barrel steel: the tubular magazine assembly Unlike a modern semi-automatic platform that utilizes a detachable box magazine, which you can instantly drop out, throw away, and replace with a fresh one if it gets damaged, a tube magazine is a permanent fixed component attached directly to the frame and barrel chassis of your rifle. Think about the hard reality of a backcountry survival scenario. If you take a violent fall down a steep, rocky ridge, or accidentally drop your rifle out of an elevated tree stand, and that thin-walled metal outer magazine tube takes a direct hit, getting even a microscopic hair-thin dent along its surface, the internal follower will instantly bind up completely. Your highly praised repeating rifle suddenly becomes a clumsy, single-shot weapon because the compressed internal spring can no longer physically push the next round upward into the carrier mechanism. Furthermore, environmental debris like mud, pine needles, grit, and moisture absolutely love to creep inside that closed tube through the opening of the side-loading gate, quietly rusting the steel spring from the inside out and causing fatal feeding stoppages when you least expect it. But the absolute biggest mechanical hazard you face with this system comes down to ammunition selection. Because the cartridges sit tightly nose to tail inside that tube, the primer of one live round rests directly against the hard tip of the bullet stacked immediately behind it. If you are reckless or uneducated enough to chamber traditional pointed Spitzer bullets instead of flat-nosed profiles or modern rubber-tipped ammunition, the heavy forward kinetic impact of a sharp recoil pulse can cause an instantaneous chain reaction detonation right inside the magazine tube. It will literally blow the front half of your rifle into flying shrapnel, destroying the magazine, destroying the barrel, and taking your support hand along with it. Decoding the JM stamp, the holy grail of gunsmithing. If you walk into any pawn shop, local gun store, or high-end online auction house today, you will witness a massive, jaw-dropping financial disparity between two rifles that look almost completely identical on the surface. Casual observers won't understand it, but savvy buyers will completely bypass a brand new, shiny rifle on the rack and willingly pay a double premium for an old, beat-up, weathered workhorse. They do this solely because of two tiny, deeply stamped letters located on the left side of the rear barrel flat, JM. That tiny, unassuming proof mark stands directly for John Marlin, and in the modern firearms community, it has become a definitive diagnostic marker for a golden quality standard that simply no longer exists in mass production. To a professional gunsmith who tears these actions down to the bare chassis, the difference between a genuine, historic JM stamped barrel and late-era automated assembly line production is absolutely staggering. In the old historic Elm Street factory in Connecticut, building a lever-action rifle was not a rushed assembly job. It was a highly respected art form driven by decades of accumulated institutional human knowledge. The interior ammunition lifters, the complex timing tracks machined into the carrier, and the spring-loaded ejector claws were not just pulled out of a massive parts bin and slammed together by automated robots. Instead, a master machinist sat at a dedicated workbench and used a fine hand file to meticulously fit those moving components together, manually checking tolerances down to 0.005 of an inch until the entire cycling action felt like sliding on wet ice. These old-school craftsmen manually tuned the trigger sear faces to ensure the break was completely crisp without any gritty creep, and they hand-indexed the barrel threading to guarantee the internal headspace parameters were absolutely flawless before the rifle ever left the factory floor. When you cycle a genuine JM Marlin, your hands are not just moving metal, they are directly feeling over a century of pride, human touch, and uncompromised mechanical judgment, something a modern corporate spreadsheet can never replicate. The tragedy of Elm Street death by a sheet. Let us lay bare the brutal, unvarnished truth about what happened back in 2007, because this is a dark masterclass in how to kill an American manufacturing legend without firing a single shot. A legacy brand that had successfully survived 2 devastating world wars, outmaneuvered a massive 17-year patent monopoly, and armed generations of frontiersmen did not die because they forgot how to forge quality ordnance steel. They did not collapse because the consumer market walked away from them. No, they were utterly, systematically annihilated by a private equity debt instrument assembled in a New York boardroom by corporate executives who had never chambered a single round of live ammunition in their entire lives. When Cerberus Capital Management bought the brand and jammed it into the bloated Freedom Group portfolio, they did not invest in the machinery or fund new research. Instead, they loaded the company's consolidated balance sheet with roughly $700 million of long-term corporate debt. Think about that staggering number. That financial liability had to be serviced with massive cash payments every single month, completely independent of how many hunting rifles were actually moving off the retail shelves or how cold the civilian market got. To keep the cash flowing into the debt machine, the boardroom suits ruthlessly gutted the human element of precision manufacturing. Master machinists with 30 years of seniority, the very people whose fathers had worked the exact same stations before them, were laid off or driven out by toxic corporate management cultures that prioritize speed over tolerances. They stripped the historic North Haven factory floor of its collective institutional knowledge in a single quarter. They replaced those masters with low-wage assembly workers who had never been trained on the geometric nuances of a side gate loader or a rifle receiver. The devastating consequence was an immediate glaring flood of rough machining marks, severe timing failures, and sloppy wood-to-metal fits hit the commercial market flaws that had never been present in pre-acquisition history. The secondary market immediately revolted, turning away from the living factory and hunting for older stock. By 2020, the asset had been completely bled dry. The historic Elm Street machinery was sold off for scrap at public auction, and a century and a half of proud American craftsmanship was buried forever under a generic commercial logistics warehouse. The modern space cowboy, the tactical lever action renaissance. But do not think for a single solitary second that the lever action story ends under the concrete rubble of a demolished Connecticut factory. Right now, across the United States, a massive grassroots countercultural shift is completely rewriting the rules of the modern firing line. A whole new generation of younger tactical shooters, who grew up entirely on modern modular weapon systems, is completely bypassing the traditional AR-15 platform and turning the classic lever gun into what the firearms industry now calls the space cowboy rifle. This is absolutely not your grandfather's wooden hunting carbine designed for a quiet afternoon in the whitetail woods. Modern shooters are taking these platforms, stripping away the traditional walnut handguards and wooden stocks, and replacing them with black anodized aircraft-grade aluminum M-LOK handguards, tactical Picatinny top rails, and modular skeletonized aluminum stocks. They are threading the muzzles to mount high-performance multi-port muzzle brakes, high-intensity weapon lights, and rugged holographic red dot sights right over the center of the receiver chassis. Underneath this futuristic, tactical facade, they are exploiting the exact same rapid-handling mechanical loop and reliable locking system that won the American West, but adapting it dynamically for home defense, vehicular truck gun logistics, and modern survival scenarios. This massive, unexpected grassroots movement has completely revived global consumer demand, proving to the entire firearms industry that the mechanical bones of this 19th century manual design are still completely unmatched when it comes to pointability, natural balance, and absolute close quarters reliability under duress. It turns out that a fast-handling lever mechanism paired with modern defensive attachments is one of the most potent, robust configurations a civilian marksman can deploy today. When Sturm, Ruger & Company dropped exactly $28.3 million to rescue the trademark, mechanical patents, and remaining factory tooling from the bankruptcy liquidation court in late 2020, they saved an absolute American legend from being erased from history books forever. They meticulously packed up the original physical engineering blueprints, moved the entire operational structure down to a state-of-the-art manufacturing facility in Mayodan, North Carolina, and completely overhauled the quality control parameters from the ground up. Let us be completely objective, fair, and unvarnished about the brand new production rifles sitting on commercial gun store racks today. From a purely mechanical standpoint, the new North Carolina-built Marlins are fundamentally superior to anything that slid off the late Freedom Group assembly lines during their dark corporate era. The action timing is incredibly crisp, the unsightly machining marks inside the receiver walls are entirely gone, and the tight wood-to-metal tolerances are better than they have been in over 20 years. But as a sole author who has spent an entire lifetime shooting, tearing down, and testing these specific platforms on the range, I have to give you the unvarnished tactical truth. Ruger successfully purchased the paper blueprints, but they could never physically purchase the living soul of Elm Street. The multi-generational human judgment, the veteran gunsmiths who knew exactly where to slick a steel raceway with a hand file so it would cycle smoothly in a sub-zero blizzard, did not relocate to North Carolina. The new guns are highly efficient, precise tools, but the living history died when those lockers were cleared out in Connecticut. The legend lives on in our gun safes, on our shoulders, and right here on the firing line.